Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Fields, the psychologist turned weight loss coach. Today, I'm talking about food addiction because it seems to be generating quite a lot of publicity lately. And I think it has a lot to do with recent research studies and it just people being more and more interested about it, which is kind of bolstered by this proliferation of news stories about it. More recently, I feel now than ever before. Now, many of you know that my background is in addiction. So, as a psychologist for 2 decades, I worked with people with all sorts of addiction. And it's really what kind of led to me segueing into the weight loss industry because the more experience I gained, and then having had my own struggles with weight loss and what I would consider a food dependency issue, and seeing so many people with drug, alcohol addictions, and other types of addictions who also seem to have a food dependency issue or a food addiction, I really got very interested in this because I felt like it was being neglected, right? So when you see the weight loss gurus on the internet, what are they trying to sell you in terms of how they're going to help you? They're talking about, they know from a nutritional standpoint how you should be eating, or from an exercise physiology standpoint, the best exercises to burn fat. A lot of them, especially weight loss coaches, are starting to talk about mindset, psychologists have been talking about for decades and decades and decades. But they're starting to talk more about, you know, this being a very important part in the weight loss um, journey. But what people are still not addressing is this food addiction that so many of us have. And I'm almost hesitant to even say that word because I feel like people won't even like watch this video. I don't know what it is, but people have like this visceral reaction when you say food addiction, where they're just like, and then they just kind of like, like a young kid, with his hands over his ears. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Addiction has gotten like a really bad stigma, and it's a shame. And then there's all these kinds of stereotype notions about it, like, people with addiction have problems with willpower. That was like, antiquated views way back when, which were awful, or they were moral shortcomings, or all these horrible things that were ascribed to people who had struggles with addiction. But still there's that stigma. It's like, I don't have control over my life. I'm at the will of a substance or a certain kind of behavior, if we're talking about like a gambling addiction or a sexual addiction. It's kind of like this really frowned upon kind of condition. But meanwhile, I don't know too many people that don't have some sort of dependency. I mean, just look at our cell phone usage today, right? And I mean, come on, it's problematic, right? That's the definition of an addiction, is when you feel compelled to do this behavior and you're feeling out of control and it has an adverse impact on your life. And many of us can easily, if we want to be honest with ourselves, look at our cell phone usage or usage online or on social media and say that it's excessive, and it is having an adverse impact on our lives because it's taking away from time with friends, time with family, or time to pursue goals and other things, right? And definitely interfering with our sleep. And I would even argue also affects our eating practices because a lot of times when we're online scrolling around, playing with our cell phones, it's a mindless activity, and this can easily go hand in hand with that. So yesterday, while I was driving home, I heard on the news that the latest research shows that cocaine is as addictive, or let me reverse that, I'm sorry. Um, Processed foods are as addictive as cocaine and other substances. Now, many of you may not be so surprised by this. I certainly wasn't that surprised by it, but it was nice to know that we have the research to confirm our suspicions, because the more and more that this becomes talked about, and the more and more that this becomes, acknowledged, and that we can accept that we have issues with food, the the sooner we can do something about that. And maybe now the research will start focusing more on what to do about it. Now, practitioners like me already know what to do about it, but it's certainly nice to have research efforts focused on that so that the field gets promoted, and there's more of an emphasis on it. And just like confirming what we kind of knew about food addiction, especially to processed foods, having research to confirm that this stuff that people like I do every day with clients actually works and is necessary. Okay, so having any kind of addiction just simply means that there is a dependency on something. And like I said, there's nothing to feel shameful about. Every one of us, just about, has some kind of dependency. There are people that have dependencies or addictions to TV shows. And I know there are going to be, people out there that are going to say, like, oh, yeah, yeah, we're addicted to everything, or, everything is an addiction. We can't just enjoy life or enjoy things. I know that's not true. The hallmark of any kind of dependency issue is simply that it's having an adverse impact on your life. So, if you watch Netflix 10 hours a day and it doesn't have an adverse impact on your life, then you do you. In fact, you could do cocaine or drink excessively. And if it doesn't have an adverse impact on your life, there's no judgment here. You do you. That's my saying, right? It's like you do you. Until you think it's a problem, then it's a problem. So here's the thing. Everyone who's following me and everyone who listens to my videos, they all readily admit that they have a weight loss issue. So we're all kind of, joined hand in hand with that, singing Kumbaya, right? Nobody has an issue admitting that, okay? And if they do, they're not following me because they are in denial, or they don't care and they don't have an issue with it, and that's great. But the people who are following me have a weight loss issue that they're acknowledging, right? So here's the thing, folks. If you're going to go that far to say I have a weight loss issue, and granted, it's probably easier to admit that because unfortunately, that's an issue that is readily visible to everyone. It's one of the things I hated about being overweight. It's like everybody can see that you're overweight, right? And I never like that. But here's the thing. If you're going to go as far as to admit that you have a weight loss struggle, why can't you just go a little bit further and say maybe there's also a food dependency issue here? Now, every addiction, every single one, involves a psychological dependency. I don't care what it is, they all have a psychological dependency. Every addiction has a psychological dependency, but not every addiction has a physical dependency, right? But many do. You can think of a lot of drugs, including alcohol, nicotine, right? And there's even some evidence that gambling addiction has some kind of physical withdrawal symptoms and hence some kind of dependency. So The psychological dependency is something that absolutely needs to be worked out with psychological strategies from someone well versed in psychology and applying them, right? But we can't ignore the physical dependency of some of these foods, namely unprocessed, or I'm sorry, namely over-processed foods, or just let's say processed foods, or foods with that are high in sugar, um, or even foods with these chemicals and additives that there is some evidence to show that those are addictive as well. But certainly the most recent research shows that processed foods are very addictive. So I'm doing a little experiment this week. Now, I eat very healthily. I really do. I don't eat so healthy where like 100% of the time I'm eating super healthy. Absolutely not. Right. But usually I'm eating very healthily and definitely from a caloric standpoint in the sense that I do not consistently overeat. I do like to indulge on the weekends and overeat some unhealthy foods, absolutely. But on average, I am not overeating because if I were, then I'd be gaining weight, which I am not. So, with that being said, I give myself a pat on the back. Very good, good job. I'm eating, at maintenance level for, with my calories on average, very good. And most of the time, I'm eating pretty healthy meals. However, there's a lot of room for improvement. For example, my breakfast, I can't help but eat waffles and pancakes and crepes and French toast. A lot of products that come in a box that are definitely processed foods. And even for lunch, I eat cold cuts, which are not as good as like, the actual meat, right? When we're eating sliced deli meats, it's not quite as good as like if you made grilled chicken, right? Deli sliced chicken, deli sliced turkey is not as good as, fresh chicken or turkey breast, right? And then if you're putting it on like a wrap, like I normally do, wraps are processed foods as well, right? I mean, anything that you can't find in nature. I'm not going to go, on a farm and find, plants, with wraps hanging off of them for the picking. So I'm doing a little experiment this week, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to minimize the amount of processed foods that I eat. And I'm talking like minimize as much as I possibly can. So, for example, for breakfast today, I had baked pork chops with sweet potato. For lunch, I had wild rice with string beans and chicken, grilled chicken. And then for dinner, I'm making like a version of steak piazzolla, which is going to be steak with some red sauce and some um, mushrooms and onions and carrots and that kind of thing. So trying really to reduce the amount of processed foods I eat. And I have to tell you, it might be a placebo effect. I don't know, but so far, I'm feeling more full and satisfied with these meals, and they're about the same calories as what I normally eat, than with the other meals I typically eat. So stay tuned. I'm going to be updating you all about my little experiment. But the one thing I want to leave with you that is super, super important is if you've come this far to admit that you have a weight loss struggle, take the extra step and see if you may also have a food addiction or food dependency, if that sits better with you, issue, and that is something that you also need to address. This is Dr. Fields. I will have a lot more to say about this at another time because I'm super passionate about this specific topic. I wish all of you the best weight loss success.